It makes me so happy that we get to do something really cool, really magnificent today. About 2006, PTCUMC became engaged in a mission endeavor on another continent. It's been a mission endeavor that has given us the opportunity to invest enormous amounts of time and energy and travel and talent and relationship building. It's also given us an opportunity to invest significant financial resources. But I'm not the expert here to talk about this today. You are going to get to hear from one of our own who is the expert on what is happening in Liberia and some of the exciting things that we have the opportunity to be a part of. This is a person that many of us don't know, but if you don't, you are in for a treat as you get to know her. Would you welcome Miss Sandy Whittle? Well, Sandy, I've been looking forward to this for a very long time. This has been a long time coming.
Me too. Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity.
So glad that we get to do this. So, I've already kind of mentioned, I've laid the very basic groundwork, but help us to understand the very beginning, the very first steps of this mission endeavor I referred to.
All right. So thank you all for allowing me to be here this morning. So the Bishop Judith Craig Children's Village in Liberia, West Africa, was established in the year 2000. It was during the course of Liberia's brutal civil war. Their civil war raged from 1989 to 2003. It just decimated the country. It tore families apart. Some were physically separated and displaced, and others shattered by death. And there was a Methodist pastor, a Liberian Methodist pastor serving in Detroit, Michigan at the time, who traveled back to Liberia to see how the churches in the States might come alongside and might help. And he became instrumental in establishing BJCCV as a safe haven for war orphans. And Judith Craig was the bishop of the Detroit Annual Conference at the time. She became part of greenlighting and fundraising for the project. And so in her honor, they named the place after her. And then they proceeded to paint every building on the campus maize and blue for Michigan. And I'm a Buckeye, so I might say the color choice is very unfortunate.
And so we took some of our first steps in this mission in 2006. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so 2006, I know some of you will clearly remember our senior pastor at the time, Chuck Hodges. He was invited to address the Liberia Annual Conference, and he traveled there and then visited the various ministries of the Methodist Church in Liberia. And when he met the kids from Bishop Judith Craig Village, he became moved to get involved. And his initial idea, and based on things that they had told him would be helpful, was to build a school. He saw that the kids were learning under a tree. There was no formal structure, no building, and so he came back to PTCUMC, and I would say preached the sermon of a lifetime in one Sunday. This congregation raised close to $70,000 to build a school in Douazan, Liberia. And the following summer, 2007, we actually deployed 4 teams. They worked back to back and constructed a school building. That school now serves 500 children, more than 500 children a year. So it serves not only the orphanage children, but the children from the surrounding community. So I would just like to pause and give a round of applause for this congregation. Education is hard to come by in Liberia, and it's highly prized. And so the fact that we were so instrumental in making that school happen is something that I am eternally grateful for. And then the relationship really just blossomed from there. We started launching, we launched a heart-to-heart sponsorship program, which connected congregants to a specific child living in the village for prayer and letter writing and fundraising. And so again, I'm just really, really grateful for the enduring support of PTC UMC to Liberia. Matt's phrase is unreasonable neighboring, and I feel like that's what we've been doing, not only for our neighbors here in Fayette County, but for our neighbors way across the Atlantic. So thank you all for continuing to care and to serve and to love.
Well, give us some insight on how we got to the present day from where we were in those early days.
Yes, so then from 2007 to 2018, we continued to execute the heart-to-heart sponsorship. The funds that we raised primarily enabled feeding and school fees for the children. And during that time, we were also deploying teams annually. I know some of you sitting in this room have traveled to Liberia as part of a mission team. We would go every summer. We did a variety of projects. We would restock the medical clinic. We would host vacation Bible school for the children. We would create special moments for the house mothers. And so it was quite a deep relationship. And in 2018, I really felt this distinct nudge from God. And he said to me, you need to go and you need to stay longer and you need to ask more questions and you need to look more deeply and really learn about the lives of the kids who call the place home. And so I reached out to my dear friend, Ashley Stahl, who used to live in Liberia and had since founded her own small nonprofit called Red Meets Green, which is all about empowering and serving Liberian communities. And I asked her, oh, there we are about to get on the plane. I asked her if she would go with me for this extended journey, and she said yes. And so away we went. And I really thought that during that trip that we would serve the various populations of the orphanage, the children, of course, the house mothers and the administration. I also thought that we would discover additional ways that our church could come alongside and improve conditions in the orphanage for the benefit of the children. And those things certainly happened, but it was also during that trip and some subsequent trips that God really allowed Ashley and me to make some crucial discoveries. And it started to shift our perspective on whether we were really serving children in a way that was honoring God.
That's kind of disruptive, isn't it, when you sense God beginning to shift your perspective? That's not entirely comfortable, is it?
It is not comfortable, and particularly since we were kind of ingrained in this relationship and doing things a certain way. So the discoveries that we made, the first one was that we watched as the children aged out from the orphanage home. So what happens is when the kids would graduate from high school diploma in hand, they were forced to leave the orphanage. And at that place, for many of them, it was really the only home that they had known or that they could recall. And we saw that they were really ill-prepared to move out from the place. I still remember the first group that had to go. Our team happened to be there, and they said, we got eviction notices. That's what they called it. We got eviction. We have to vacate. And so we watched them just struggling. They didn't have the preparation. They didn't really have relationships with adults or mentors. And so it was hard. They didn't know what to do next. They didn't know where their meals were going to come from or where they were going to live. And at the same time, we started to learn that a large number of the kids living in the village actually had living parents. And some of them even had 2 living parents. And almost every other child living there had an adult in there, a relative, an auntie or a grandma, who was likely well able to care for them if given a little bit of support to do so.
So just to clarify, you have an orphanage, but few of the residents are actually orphans.
Yes. And so it sounds kind of shocking. But what had happened is over the years, I told you that it was established as a safe haven for war orphans, but what had happened over the years, the focus had kind of shifted, or the audience of kids who lived there had shifted from truly being orphans to just being kids from vulnerable families who had trouble providing food or school fees for their children, but really wanted the best for their child, saw the orphanage home as a solution to their challenges. Education in particular in Liberia, it's hard to come by. Families really struggle to save that much money to pay school fees, and yet they want their kids to have the opportunity for education. So the orphanage was solving that problem. It was a great way for kids to be in school, but it was really creating a deeper problem, which is the separation of kids from their families and the weakening of the family structure. It happens in Liberia, of course, that's where we observed it, but really I've since learned that this is very common throughout the world, that orphanages kind of have that impact. And so then we started researching and learning more about a global shift that is taking place away from institutional care to family-based care. The United Nations had done a lot of research on the outcomes for kids who have grown up in orphanages, and they published the Convention on the Rights for the Child that say, while orphanages, they have a place post-war or post-natural disaster, they should really be a last resort and really only a very temporary measure until a good, strong family can be identified for a child, whether it's a biological family member or a foster or adoptive family. So that was discovery 3.
So I want to emphasize this point.
Yeah.
So you had the United Nations make this observation. They're not the only ones. Have a lot of sociologists and people that study such things make similar observations, just like this agency, the Methodist Home in Sierra Leone. Lots of other nonprofits, both faith-based and secular, had made the same observation that family-based care, whether it's with parents or older siblings or aunts, uncles, grandparents, some kind of relative, is superior for the well-being of vulnerable children, even surpassing in importance a guaranteed bed and food and education. Am I understanding that right?
That is absolutely right. There's a lot of science and data that talk about kids who grow up in orphanage homes are behind mentally, physically, emotionally, socially. And so the science is there that says we got to figure out a way to do this better.
But it's not just science, is it, Sandy? It's not just science.
It is absolutely not. So the Bible has plenty to say about the importance of families as well. God connected us to a Methodist orphanage home in Sierra Leone that had gone through this process of reunifying all of their kids to families, and we learned that families were thriving with their kids back home. And so yes, we were motivated to be in alignment with the United Nations, but probably more importantly, we were motivated to be in alignment with God's word. God's word says that families are important. Psalm 68:6 is one that I like, and it says, God sets the lonely in families. So we really started feeling compelled.
So if you don't care for the UN, if you're not sure the scientists know what they're talking about, even the Bible says kids belong with families.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. So if you're looking for your signs, there are plenty of them out there. And so we started feeling really convicted and I would say very excited about how can we help the kids from Judith Craig Village get back to their families? What would it take? And we knew that they would need some material support, at least short term. They'd probably need some food support, some help with the school fees. But what we were really excited about doing is empowering them, strengthening them, so that one day they would know the dignity of raising their own kids and wouldn't even need the donor support. So we started brainstorming, learning, putting together ideas. My friend Ashley at Red Meats Green hired 2 incredible incredible social workers, and we knew that they would be pivotal in this work if it was going to succeed.
Sure.
And then we stepped into this whole process of talking about it with the orphanage administration. And I would say it was really hard. It was met with great resistance at first. And in fairness to them, this would be a radical shift. Instead of having kids in this confined space, kids would go back and we would be ministering to entire families, but outside this compound. And so there was great resistance, great reluctance, but over time, and really it was a period of years talking and looking at it from different angles and praying.
And networking. I mean, you made lots of trips just to network with people that might be a resource for accomplishing this goal.
Yeah, because it's hard work and it's not something you take lightly. You're talking about kids and families' lives and well-being. So we learned so much and we're just so excited. But the orphanage administration, they weren't moving along at the same level of excitement that we were. But ultimately, we had a meeting with the board of directors of the orphanage and with the Methodist bishop in Liberia. And the bishop and the board ultimately said, yes, we know this is right for the families. So then we created a working document that really spelled out all the roles. What would PTC UMC do? What would Red Meat Screen do? How would the church in Liberia be involved? We spelled out all the roles. And it was at that point that they said, we're not ready. We're not ready to make this change. And so it was hard because we had learned so much and we were excited about moving in a new direction. We felt clearly that's the way God was leading. There's a quote, Sean and I have talked about it before. Maya Angelou says, do the best that you can until you know better. And then when you know better, you can do better.
Yeah, I love that quote.
I do too.
Yeah.
And that's where we were. We had learned so much. You couldn't unlearn. And so we were excited about moving in a new path, taking things in a new direction with God as our guide. And so at the end of 2022, it just became apparent that we had to make a break in our relationship with BJCCV.
And I just want to dwell on that point for just a second. It's not that the folks at BJCCV have no vision for how to care for vulnerable children, but the vision that they have for how to do that, and the vision that has begun to take shape in you and in Red Meat Screen and thus in our community that's a part of this, is that we see something different. We need to follow a different path. It's not about who's right or who's wrong or who's the bad guy. It's a different way of seeing how to be faithful to God's call in caring for people that is clear God cares deeply about.
That is absolutely right. Yeah. My objective today is not to toss anyone under the bus or make us feel bad about the leadership at Judith Craig Village. It was just a differing vision. And in order to have a truly effective partnership, there has to be shared vision and shared mission. And we were not at that place any longer. So end of 2022, we kind of parted ways, and it's painful. We know those kids. We have been with them year after year, and we've watched them grow up. And so separation is really painful, and our greatest concern is for the well-being of the children who live there. And so we continue to pray for them. But God has been so clear. Share the Isaiah verse. So I think Sean was the first one who quoted it to me, and I've watched it come true just time and time again.
Maybe
Isaiah.
so, but then you quoted it back to me, and so I don't really know where we left it. But yeah, but this is from Isaiah where God says, "See, I'm doing a new thing. Even now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I'm making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland." And I just love, especially that last sentence, because you just don't expect there to be a way in the wilderness. You don't expect there to be streams in the desert, in the wasteland, in the heat and the dryness. You just don't expect those things, and yet God says, "I'm doing something unexpected. I'm doing something new." And how cool it is when we have the grace to be able to see that new thing that God is doing.
Yep. And
So about a year ago, you started to take some big steps forward.
Yep. So beginning of 2023, the social workers and Ashley, the head of Red Meat Screen, and I started brainstorming again. All right, so we're not going to be focusing on reunifying the children from BJCCV, at least not at this point. So where do we focus? And God, again, providentially helped us to learn that 3 kids who used to live at the orphanage home had been placed back with their families. But it was rapidly done. The orphanage administrator felt that the kids had misbehaved, and so he just put them back with their families.
It was one of those evictions.
Correct. It really was an eviction. He felt like they misbehaved, so just send them back home. So there was no social worker involvement in that, no plan for how to bring those families back together or how to strengthen them. And so we just, through prayer, God just clearly pointed us, start walking with those 3 families. Start implementing the ideas that you've had and that you've learned about for what makes for a strengthened family. And so we just started journeying with them, and it's been so cool to see. Our social workers really are pivotal in all of this, because what they do is they assess each family individually. It's not a cookie cutter approach. They look at each family, certainly assessing their needs, but I think what's even more important in the process is assessing their strengths. Where are these families already strong? Do the mamas like to make soap? What strengths do they bring, and how can we bolster the strengths so that ultimately they're standing on their own? So 2023, we started walking with the 3 families, evaluating how things were going, learning a lot. Throughout the course of the year, we learned of 3 additional families that were really in dire straits, really on the verge of placing a child in an orphanage. So we added those 3 families to the program. And then the other thing that was so important during 2023 was God pointed us to several partner organizations so that now we can round out our services. This is complex work. Not every family has the same needs, and so there's no way to do it all as one small organization. So God pointed us to a partnership. There's an organization based out of Cartersville, Georgia, called Live 2540, and they were already doing a lot of work in Liberia, and so we are now partnering with them. They provide monthly food support to our families, and that's been a huge relief and a huge blessing to the families. We also have partnered with 2 medical clinics in Liberia to provide medical care for our families. So what happens typically in Liberia, if a family can't afford to seek treatment, they just don't. That's really common. So they get malaria, they get typhoid, they just soldier through. They don't seek treatment. And so Preston, one of our social workers, had relationships with a couple of leaders of medical clinics, and we formed these relationships. So now our families, when they're sick, they don't have to worry. They go to the clinic, and the clinics have been so amazing to say, okay, we're just going to treat your families. Red Meat Screen, we'll send you the bill later, but our most important thing to do is to treat these families.
Well, and what a blessing that is for families that often just ignore their medical needs.
Correct.
Because of a lack of finances.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. The other thing that was really exciting to me is because I know that the orphanage home was a draw primarily because families wanted their kids to be in school. We repurposed some heart-to-heart funds that had already been raised. And so now all of the kids in the Red Meat Screen programs, they're living at home and going to school.
A little bit of legal commentary.
Yes.
We repurposed those funds with donor agreement and donor permission. Just want to make sure everybody knows that. We broke no rules. We broke no laws. We got in writing from every donor that we could find and that would render a decision that we got permission to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I heard a leadership guru recently talk about the power of the and he said you should value results and relationships. And I think that applies to, so these kids are in their homes, so there's the power of the relationship, but there's the power of the and, because they're still in school. They're getting that result of being in school. So that's been beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, that's the beautiful
watch.
thing is it wasn't a choice between the education and the food and the housing that the parents were desiring. It is that and the familial connection that's so essential.
Absolutely.
I
Yes.
like that.
So it's been so fun to watch. And at the same time, the parents are getting strengthened and empowered. So they're getting parenting training from the social workers. They're getting business skills training. We have this really amazing partner organization called Universal Outreach Foundation, and they do business skills development training, and then they give out grants. If you make it through their stringent courses, they give out grants at the end so that you can launch a small business. We formed a partnership with the evangelical churches of Liberia, and they are offering trauma healing training. So imagine the trauma of having been separated from your parent or your child for that long. So trauma healing training is taking place. And we've also, through the evangelical churches of Liberia, launched savings clubs. And these are something that have become really important in the global south. So it's families coming together. Most people in Liberia don't save their money in a bank. And we can talk about why that is for a long time, but they don't because it's risky. So instead, families come together, they save their money. Liberia uses the term small, small. So they're saving their money small, small. But over time, that money grows and they can take out loans to launch or to expand a small business. So all of these elements of the program have been clicking into place. And so we're watching our families grow and bond and get on this path to self-sufficiency. And really, we're watching them as they trust God as their ultimate source. And
So tell us a bit about this organization that you have been affiliated with and you are stepping into more and more influential responsibilities. Tell us about Red Meets Green.
Yep, thank you for that question. So Red Meets Green, you may have been wondering about the name. I know it's a little unusual, but what it means is, so red signifies Liberia's past. It's bloodshed, war, trauma. Green represents Liberia's future. You think of green as new life, new hope, new opportunity. And of course, we believe that you really meet green when you trust Jesus as your ultimate source. So in everything that we do, we want to model the incredible love and goodness of Jesus. And I am going to brag again on the social workers because I really just think they're the secret sauce to all of it. They're Liberian, and so they clearly understand the challenges that our families face. And so they show up at the homes of our families and they encourage them and they pray with them and they dream with them. And it's just been so marvelous to watch these families. They've got a ways to go until they're independent, but we're watching them walk forward into a new hope.
Well, Sametta and Preston, they not only understand their native home culture, but they also are highly trained and educated and equipped to bring a rich body of wisdom and knowledge to that together. I mean, they truly are gifted and called for what they're doing. You've brought us from the very first steps to where we are now. What's next?
So thank you for that. So 2024, I feel like we're already off to a really exciting start. We are expanding our partnership agreement with Universal Outreach Foundation. I mentioned them briefly a moment ago. They've been providing business skills training for our families, but this is a really remarkable organization, well known in Liberia. It's run by a Canadian couple who have lived in Liberia for 17 years. and they do amazing work in the area of education and empowerment. And so they've become fans of the work of Red Meets Green and have basically offered to take us under their wing and to share some of their basic administrative services with us, like accounting, for example, is one that we've been kind of muddling through. How do you get the money to Liberia, and how do you keep it safe and accountable? And they have all those processes worked out. So with them expanding this partnership with us, that's going to enable our social workers to stay focused on encouraging families. And I'm so thrilled about that. We also are adding to our social work team. We've been interviewing additional social workers, and we're budgeting and planning to add 20 additional families to the program this year. So lots of incredible things on the horizon.
That's a huge step forward. What can we do? How can we be involved?
Thank you for that. I just am so grateful for all the ways you've already been committed to Liberia and to Liberians, but I'll give you a few specific things. First of all, I would say, please pray. Pray for our Red Meets Green team. We've discussed how this is difficult work, it's important work, and we don't take it lightly, so we want to make sure that we're continuing to hear God clearly and just follow his lead. I would also say, please pray for Liberia. They have a newly inaugurated president. His name's Joseph Boakai. He's 80 years old. But there's optimism in the air in Liberia. People are very hopeful about this new administration. They have had just a long history of bad governance, corruption and oppression, and people there are just crippled by poverty. And at the end of the previous administration, things were as bad as I've seen it in Liberia. And so there's hope in the air about this new guy. But just pray that God would be his guide as well. And then just stay tuned. There will be other ways that the congregation can serve. We're looking at potentially sending some supplies over that could help our families as they launch small businesses. I will also publish opportunities for members of the congregation that want to connect with our 2 Liberian social workers to pray with them and to encourage them. They are really, really remarkable, but it's draining work to be involved in the lives and the issues of so many families. So praying and encouraging them would just be huge. Also, we're excited about taking teams again. We haven't taken teams to Liberia in several years. We had kind of put that on pause, but we're excited to start cranking that up again. So if you've ever felt like maybe God's nudging you to get on an airplane and travel to West Africa, I would love for you all to have a chance to come along and walk alongside our families in person. And then if you have skills in the area of communication or fundraising or technology, I would love for you to reach out to me. We are a very small team with lots to do, and so there would be lots of ways that you all could volunteer your talents with Red Meets Green. So please reach out if you would like to share your skills and abilities. And then financially, we mentioned that we've repurposed some of the heart-to-heart funding, but if you'd like to give further, please go to the Red Meets Green website. It's www.redmeetsgreen.org. And just know that if you donate, you're enabling us to bring more families in and to set them on this path to stability and financial independence and really walking out their own calling that God has on their lives.
Any closing words?
Yeah, so just final appreciation for you all. I have this incredible opportunity to go to Liberia and represent the congregation. And last time I was there, they presented me with a certificate to give to all of you. So maybe we'll find a place to hang it up and you can look at it more closely. But this certificate is awarded to PTC UMC, our true partner in Christ, for numerous contributions made to Red Meets Green through prayers, encouragement, financial aid, and more to strengthen and reunify Liberian families. So just know that you all are rock stars in the minds of the social workers in Liberia, and they have expressed their gratitude to you for all of your faithfulness. And I just want to close by expressing my gratitude to all of you. You all have been gracious to give me this time and to give me this platform to share. But I would tell you, there is nothing unique or special about me. I'm just trying to do what I can to walk out what I believe God has called me to. But I know He's called every single one of us. There's a purpose on all of our lives, a purpose and a plan, and it may not be in Liberia. It may just be, somewhere else in your own neighborhood, and that's great too. But so all glory is to Him, and I just wanted to say to you all, if I've had any strength or confidence in stepping into my calling, it's because this congregation has faithfully modeled that for me. Time and time again, you all are generous and compassionate and loving and Christ-filled, and you are radical and unreasonable neighbors. And so I just thank you all from the bottom of my heart.
Would you express your gratitude for Sandy?